Places, eh? There sure are a lot of them. Most are normal enough, at least on the surface, maybe with a secret or two hidden just behind the net curtains. Others stand out because they look different, or are nice, or historical, or because it's edifying to wander their nooks and crannies. This film is dedicated to that third category, the very strangest and most mysterious locations found within the boundary walls of the known world. A mix of man-made and Mother Nature manufactured sites that have to be seen to be comprehended, and even then with a silly look on your face. So take my hand, dear viewer, and let me lead you through the dark recesses and twisting corridors of the strangest places on Earth. The Bone Chapel. Sedlec Ossuary looks unassuming from the outside. After all, it's not much more than a small chapel. But inside, things get a little more interesting. That's because it's furnished and decorated with human bones. Not just a handful, or even a bucketful, but the skeletal remains of at least 40,000 people, the same number as could fill a decent-sized football stadium. Over the years, remains of the deceased have been picked apart and artistically arranged into chandeliers, coats of arms, ornaments, symmetrical pyramids, and even decorative passages of written text. The chandelier of Sedlec Ossuary is its centrepiece, famous because it contains at least one of every bone in the human body. So far, so eerie. But this isn't some satanic mausoleum or lunatic's playground. The reason for the bones being there is actually quite mundane. Located in Kutna Hora in the Czech Republic, the ossuary has its origins in the 13th century, but the bones didn't start going up until much later. Over the years, with high casualty events like the Black Death and the Hussite Wars, thousands of corpses were interred in the cemetery, which eventually became overcrowded. By the late 15th century, demand for space became so fierce that a Gothic chapel was built to house the bones of those formerly buried in the cemetery. But it wasn't until the 1900s that a woodcarver named František Rint was commissioned to organise the massive repository of bones into something resembling order. He was the one who transformed the ossuary from a simple storage depot into the macular spectacular we see today. Viewed as an art installation, it conveys the message that time is slipping through our fingers, that life is fragile, that regret is real, and so are missed opportunities. As a last resting place, it kind of does the same job, while conveying, it has to be said, rather downhearted notions of the Christian afterlife. Unsettled by the ossuary's morbid aesthetic, many tourists leave coins as tributes to the Grim Reaper, hoping he'll grant them a little more time on Earth in exchange. The door to hell. Part of a natural gas field in Darvaza, Turkmenistan, the giant hole in the ground known as the door to hell has been burning continuously since 1971. In appearance, it's a large crater with a permanent fiery glow resulting from the gas being consumed inside. At night, it's visible for miles around, transforming from a geological oddity into a devilish beacon that ignites the otherwise pitch-black landscape. So strange and forbidding is the giant and perpetually flaming pit that the site attracts thousands of tourists who descend on the site every year. Visitors even camp nearby to marvel at the phantasmic flames piercing the night. An everlasting underground furnace sounds a lot like something out of Greek mythology, but in truth, the origins of the Darvaza gas crater are human in nature. It began life when a Soviet drilling rig accidentally punched through into a massive natural gas cavern, causing the ground to collapse and the rig to fall in. To prevent the spread of methane gas, geologists set it on fire, expecting it to burn out in a few weeks, but the flames have been raging on ever since. More than half a century later, there's still no end in sight for the door to hell. Since 2010, plans have been under review to somehow control the Darvaza crater, or at least reduce its negative impacts on local populations, wildlife and the environment. But to this day, and for the foreseeable future, hell's front door remains open and burning bright. Ghost Palace. Hamilton Palace is one of the grandest and most opulent mansions in the United Kingdom, bigger even than Buckingham Palace, the seat of the British royal family. The house is created in a neoclassical Victorian design, a vast and sprawling edifice topped off with a broad copper dome and surrounded by endless grounds. The handful of people who have been inside the building report a grand central staircase, complicated arrangements of large halls, stone balustrades and Roman pillars. Not to mention an entire floor dedicated to the owner's art collection. But even the most casual observer will notice a glaring issue. It's falling apart. The structure is crumbling, materials lie scattered and abandoned, and weeds are sprouting through cracks in the walls. How does such a rich home fall into such an advanced state of disrepair? You'd be forgiven for thinking this was some Victorian oligarch's pet project, now faded from its former glory after scores of years of habitation. But it's much newer than it looks, and in reality, it wasn't even finished. Commissioned by the elusive and many say repellent multimillionaire Nicholas Hoogstraten, who goes by the name Nicholas Adolf von Hessen, its grand scale and declining condition make it a particularly striking landmark. Construction began just 4 decades ago, in 1985, the building beginning at a snail's pace and slowing down from there. 20 years in, with progress stuttering, the total construction bill is said to have spiralled to £40 million, roughly $50 million. And when von Hessen fell out with his architect, the build went from slow to stationary. The reasons for the failure of this project are complex, but a curious one could be von Hessen's motivation for building the thing in the first place. Rumour has it that the house doubles as a giant inheritance tax dodge. Built in the grounds is a large marble mausoleum, which von Hessen plans to be his final resting place. Under English law, this means the entire property, house and all, can be owned by a perpetual trust. Building a palace and calling it a grave is, it seems, a great way to pass money on to your kids without the taxman taking his cut. But, beyond the superficial, this might not be the nicest place to spend eternity. The place is littered with security fences and keep-out signs. And, presumably much to von Hessen's annoyance, there's also a rambler's right-of-way running right through the middle of it. And so, there it sits. A testament to the vagaries of wild ambition, legal battles, cash down the drain, and the relentless march of time. But von Hessen isn't giving up on his dream just yet. Responding to a 2016 campaign to convert the disused property into a homeless shelter, von Hessen released a statement. The homeless, the majority of whom are so by their own volition or sheer laziness, are one of the filthiest burdens on the public purse today. The chance of my offering an opportunity for them to occupy Hamilton Palace is just ludicrous. Lovely. He also rejected the notion that the then 30-year project had stalled. Even the most moronic of peasants would be able to see from the pictures that we have been busy landscaping the grounds of the palace. Colourful geyser. Like the Darvaza gas field, the Fly Geyser in Washoe County, Nevada, is an example of how human intervention can cause striking natural geological features. The story of the Fly Geyser began in the 1960s, when drilling on a well intended to be a source of water for irrigation released a plugged-up geothermal spring. Pressurized hot water flowed to the surface. Over the years, these waters, rich in minerals like calcium, silica and algae, began to accumulate around the site, forming the stunning, multicolored deposits that now characterize the Fly Geyser. Today it is composed of several mound-like formations, with near boiling water continuously flowing over them. The geyser has multiple conic openings of about 6 feet or 1.8 meters tall, and the entire mound is 25 to 30 feet high. It's located on private land owned by the same people who put on the Burning Man festival, and generally not open to the public, which only adds to the allure. The surrounding desert landscape is a vast barren expanse, with dry, cracked earth and distant mountain ranges, making the rather camp geyser all the more visually striking. Heavenly Cathedral. The Sagrada Familia is an iconic basilica located in Barcelona, Spain. Designed by Antoni Gaudi, it blends Gothic motifs with Art Nouveau, producing a soaring, otherworldly aesthetic. Its intricate facades and towering spires, gargoyles, carvings and copious stained glass are unmatched by any art installation, monument or tower anywhere in the world. But the good people of Barcelona have had to wait for their church to go up. Completing a masterpiece of this scope and scale takes time. Remarkably, construction on the Sagrada Familia began in 1882 and is still ongoing, funded by a combination of private donations and entrance fees. Gaudi himself devoted the last 15 years of his life exclusively to the project. When he died in 1926, he had already been working on the build for 40 years, and at that time it was said to only be about 20% complete. Reportedly, when asked about this extensive timeline, Gaudi responded, "My client is not in a hurry." The Sagrada Familia is due to open its doors formally as a completed project in 2026, marking the centenary of its designer's death. Crystal Ocean. Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia is the world's largest salt flat. It is all that remains of an ancient and vast inland sea called Lake Bonneville, which dried up tens of thousands of years ago, leaving behind a thick, flat crust of salt. It sits at an altitude of 12,000 feet above sea level and contains about 10 billion tonnes of salt, roughly 25,000 tonnes of which is mined and extracted every year for industry. It's also very, very flat and very, very white, and apart from the odd salt mound, continues this way in many cases as far as the eye can see. When it's dry, the salt crust is clear, with the polygonal salt patterns creating a striking landscape. But when it rains, an even more arresting visual phenomena takes place. With the benefit of a thin layer of water, the salt flats transform into a huge reflective surface, like a vast glass ocean. Combined with the smoothness of the salt beneath, a perfect mirror is created, reflecting the sky and surrounding landscape with stunning clarity. During the rainy season, typically between December and April, this mirage is especially striking, an almost infinite sky displayed on the ground as well as in the air. It's a profound and confusing thing to witness, the viewer almost unsure as to what's up and what's down, the horizon a seeming singularity between two heavens, an endless, silent, bleached world of sky. Stone Forest. Shilinyi Autonomous County in southwestern China is a region of stunning, if offbeat, natural beauty. Best known for its stone forest, or Shilin, the area is a vast dramatic landscape. Towering, jagged stone pillars rise from the ground like petrified trees, forming an alien forest stretching more than 350 square kilometres. The forest has several distinct areas, each offering a different experience for the senses. You can wander around narrow pathways flanked by sharp rock spires, and poke around limestone caves that chime with the forlorn echoes of the past. The existence of such an unusual landscape has puzzled people for millennia, giving rise to some pretty out-there folklore. But in truth, the landscape was created during the Permian period of geologic time, around 270 million years ago. Back then, the area was a shallow sea, with deposits of sandstone overlain by limestone at its basin. As the region gradually lifted over time, exposure to wind and running water eroded the sandstone, leaving only the limestone pillars behind. That's the official story anyway. According to local mythology, the forest was really created when a young and beautiful woman of the indigenous Yi people turned herself and everything else to stone after being denied permission to marry her suitor. Feel free to believe whichever version suits you. Discordant Temple. Wat Rong Kun, also known as the White Temple, is a striking landmark located in the small town of Chiang Rai in northern Thailand. The contemporary Buddhist temple, designed by the renowned Thai artist whose name is currently appearing on the screen, stands as some might say a bizarre blend of traditional religious iconography and modern artistic expression. Completed in 1997, the temple features a gleaming white exterior which represents purity in Buddhism, while every trinket and bauble within is meant to evoke elements of Buddhist teachings. The sparkling mirrored glass embedded in the structure represents the Buddha's wisdom, reflecting the teachings of enlightenment. The journey into Wat Rong Kun begins with the bridge of the Circle of Life, which spans a pond symbolising the passage from the mundane to the divine. On either side of the bridge, hands reach out from the ground, representing human desires, greed, and suffering, and symbolising the realm of hell. But that's not all. The temple complex includes several other wonders, including a resplendent golden building housing the toilets. These are the first obvious signs that all is not exactly mainstream. The interior features murals of Buddhist traditions, fine, but also images of Western pop culture, including depictions of Superman, Spider-Man, The Matrix, and even the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. This is an unsettling commentary on the struggle between good and evil, and the way contemporary society rubs up against everything from the concept of materialism to the relentless march of global conflict. The juxtaposition of modern and at times jarring imagery with the sacred teachings of Buddha invites visitors to reflect on the nature of morality, spiritual enlightenment, and the human condition. The temple is meant to help you contemplate life, death, and the pursuit of enlightenment, traditional versus progressive, and embrace the essential exquisiteness of all these contradictions. Ah! No! No! The contemporary Buddhist temple, designed by renowned Thai artist Karmachai Kositpipat. Pipat?